Welcome back to Breathing Space, the quietest corner of the internet. I'm Sam Jarvis. If you're struggling to drift off to sleep tonight, know that that's okay. You're in the right place. Hit the follow button now for access to more relaxing bedtime stories and start drifting off a little easier night after night. Before we revisit another rich Arthurian legend, half torn from the pages of Anglo-Norman French, Le Morte d'Arthur, and glued back together with the whisperings, legends, myths, and folklore that has survived the centuries, let's take a moment to wind down and relax. Come to settle in a comfortable position and allow your eyes to gently drift closed. Welcome a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it for a moment and sigh out in relief. Breathe in and out. Inhale and exhale. Feel yourself sinking deeper and deeper into relaxation with each soothing cycle of your breath. Feel your muscles relax, your mind clear, and your breath deepen. Here, in this moment, know that you are safe. You are loved. You are important. With each cycle of your breath, you are strengthening the connection between your mind, body, and being by taking this time for yourself to relax, to sleep. You are nourishing the most sacred relationship there is, the relationship you hold with yourself. Say a silent thank you to yourself for allowing yourself a moment to rest as you let your mind unwind to the tune of my voice. Now, if you're feeling ready, allow me to tell you a story. This is the tale of Merlin, the wise old wizard counsel to the great King Arthur. By all accounts, Merlin was a kind old wizard. For centuries his name has been heralded across Avalon and whispered deep in the crush of narrow, cobbled streets that made up Camelot. But this is not the well-told tale of the aged sorcerer who sealed his soul willingly in the trunk of an even older tree and welcomed an eternal slumber. This is the tale of a boy born to a mortal woman on the borders of Camelot and the Cambion, the shape-shifting demon she had fallen in love with. Like most, Merlin spent much of his youth unsure of who he was. Indeed, in recent years his character has gotten muddied by producers and penmen alike, his traits traded out for more likable ones, though contemporary interpretations have branded him as boyish and bumbling, good-hearted and reluctantly heroic. The oldest tales tell rather a different story. Though no less steeped in magic, the earliest stories of Merlin have always seemed rather more believable to me, and perhaps a little more honest. This is the story of a young man, just as lost perhaps as you and I have felt at times. This is the story of someone flawed, someone human, or rather human enough to have his heart and mind a tangle. Lucifer and his comrades had tested the patience of those that resided above the cloud line in heaven. For centuries they had played tricks on the angels, pushing and pushing to see how far the forgiveness they preached would extend. It took thousands of years for them to finally push too far and get themselves exiled. They had never heard of the Son of God, Jesus, Christ's representative on earth, had been hidden from them for centuries, shrouded by the cloud line, perhaps intentionally. Once the devil and his demons had been banished to earth, it took no time at all for the preachings of the Son of God to reach them. They found themselves vilified in the Bible's writings. The friends they were able to make on earth, they lost in the instance they revealed their true nature. They could feel fear ebbing off of people each time they ducked out of the tavern they were lodging in. And after a time, I think perhaps that fear became unbearable for them. Lucifer had never felt at home in heaven. He would never be made welcome on earth. And so the demons and he made plans to carve out an underworld where they could hold their own court and live and thrive, and where their sneers, their sharp features, and their vicious beauty without judgment from the soft-skinned mortals who still breathed and bled, and the deities who had rejected them. There was, however, a secondary part to Lucifer's plan, one that the devil has done well to keep to himself over the centuries. Only his innermost circle were responsible for enacting the secondary part of his scheme, and over the centuries most have managed to keep tight-lipped about the events that transpired in the wake of Lucifer's move beneath the surface of the earth. The smattering of people that know the sordid details now learned it only through whisperings, through family folklore and gossip. Lucifer desired to have his own representative on earth, and without a wife or a child of his own, he sent one of the greatest shapeshifters that had ever lived back above to tread the land and sire a child with a human woman, one that he hoped would look mortal enough to be accepted by the humans, but would pertain the same powers as he did. That child would one day come to be known as Merlin. In the stories I have heard, the demon itself never bore a name of his own, but to young Edhana, the soon-to-be mother of Merlin, the demon would always be known as Aneurin. The face in Aneurin warfare was a handsome one, rugged in all the right places. His shoulders spanned wider than the rest of the shoulders that Edhana had seen in the village on market day, and though the demon felt a shrunken version of himself whenever he bore Aneurin's body, Edhana saw only light and strength in the set of his shoulders when she looked at him. The story of Aneurin and Edhana has been twisted and twisted for centuries. The shapeshifter has been painted as the most heartless of beings by the angels and the most devious and manipulative by mankind. The truth of it is that Aneurin did come to love Edhana. He held her and he laughed with her, and he snuck through her bedroom window by night and tried to put to rights the harshness and cruelty of life in Camelot all those centuries ago. No one had ever handed Edhana anything, and though a hard life in harsh weather had made those in her family cruel, a softness had remained in her, an openness, a desire to love and be loved. Lucifer would have you believe that Adhana had no idea who or what Aneurin was, but I've heard it said that he told her, and that he never even needed to. Deep down, Adhana had always been able to sense something beneath his skin. It was always warm to the touch. After long hours spent in the underworld, his pulse ran slower than hers. Even when the night had been a heady one, he never seemed to break a sweat or crave a breath. He didn't seem to need oxygen nearly half as much as he seemed to need her. Lucifer hadn't considered that Aneurin might fall in love with the mortal, or that when he did, the demon might try to avoid putting Lucifer's plan into action to save Adhana from the inevitable judgment she would receive in Camelot for bearing a child, a half-demon no less, out of wedlock. In a shocking display of compassion, Lucifer granted his friend time. Ultimately, when Aneurin could no longer bear to be away from her, he wed Adhana, resigned to spend the rest of his life beside her in the human realm, and together they bore a child, Merlin. Merlin was born to be an anarchist. That is what Lucifer had intended for him, and the devil, by that time far too distracted by the flourishing underworld, assumed he had left the child in safe hands that would guide him toward the darkness. But Adhana had awakened a kindness, an inner ease in Aneurin, and together they raised the boy to be kind and to always be as compassionate as he could be. They kept Merlin's true nature from him for much of his youth, not knowing that even as a young boy, Merlin had begun to experience symptoms of his power. The boy had kept them to himself for fear there was something deeply evil about the core of his being. For a long time, Merlin felt he didn't quite recognize the face that stared back at him in reflections. The weather in Camelot left much to be desired. It seemed that Avalon, across the border, caught the sun, and Camelot only the rain and snow. In the puddles and frozen window panes, Merlin was sure he caught his features changing shape, and not in the sense that the other children's were. Their chubby cheeks hollowed out and their brows grew more severe, but Merlin was quite sure that on Monday he had had blue eyes, and by the following Wednesday they had turned a deep brown. When he turned 14 and went out to work, the full effects of Merlin's powers began to show their flair. Working in the fields, he could sense the storms before they arrived, and when he spoke to the horses and the sheep in their pastures on his walk home, he was quite sure he could hear their voices inside his mind. There was much unrest between Avalon and Camelot at the time, and by age 16, aware of his powers and at last coming into his own, Merlin was overcome by a premonition more vivid than any he had had before, and any he would ever have in the future. Merlin knew to create peace between the realms. It was his responsibility to guide the not yet conceived King Arthur in his reign and ensure the king valued peace and fought only to achieve it, or when he felt sure it was at stake. The tales that come between Merlin's 16th year and his 600th one are long ones, and perhaps we'll find time for them another night. Remember, much of tonight's tale has been kept secret for centuries, and some things are best